Happy New Year. I know January is literally coming to an end as I say that, but still, I hope you had a phenomenal holiday season. Being 1 month into the new year, I hope everyone is thriving. I can't help but feel like it's been a pretty slow month. This makes me wonder if 2022 will fly by and be yet another year that just kind of meshes with the rest in terms of feeling like time is irrelevant, kind of like it did in 2020. Hopefully not, because this is literally the first year that I have been excited about in a while, so I'm really hoping it's a good one. I don't know, I got like a really good feeling on New Year's Eve, and I was like, this might be a pretty good year, but trying really hard not to jinx it. So I have no idea if me saying that just jinxed it or not, but needless to say, I'm excited. Jumping right in, a new year begins, and the first thing you hear about is New Year's resolutions. Oftentimes, very strange yet similar set goals from individuals across the board. Then there's the ongoing joke that February comes around and those New Year's resolutions have been completely forgotten. That conversation of setting goals at the beginning of the year can be overwhelming and a little discouraging for some. I myself do not set any New Year's resolutions at the beginning of the year because it has just never made sense to me. It makes sense for some, and if you do make resolutions, you are still valid in doing so. New Year's resolutions have just never made a whole lot of sense to me, and I guess I just don't understand them as well as I'd like. So I started doing something else that made a little bit more sense to me, a ritual that is very personalized to me, if you will. So every year, I write down 100 goals for the upcoming year. So like this year, it's 100 goals for 2022. So typically what I do is sometimes starting in October, the fall months basically, I get a notebook and I go somewhere that I feel at peace and I write 100 goals for the new year. So like I'll sit in a coffee shop or a park and do this. This all started when I wanted to have goals, not resolutions so much, but actual goals that I wanted to achieve in that year. This started at the end of 2018 on New Year's Eve when I had the sudden burst of optimism. I wanted to start setting goals for myself, so I wrote 3 simple goals that I could achieve in a few hours that I had left of the year 2018. So one of those 3 goals was to write 100 goals for 2019. It's important to start small and acknowledge your efforts no matter how small or big that they may be. That's why I only wrote 3 goals on that New Year's Eve for 2018. That last goal, 3 being the 100 goals for 2019, was quite ambitious, but I felt like I could do it. I was very excited. When writing goals, people often overwhelm themselves too quickly, causing anxiety that eventually leads to burnout and ultimately quitting. So if you're new to this or you would like to start setting goals, resolutions, or whatever best relates to you, start small with maybe 1 goal for the entire year and just don't tell anybody about it if you don't want to. That way you can quietly complete your goal, be proud of yourself, and maybe next year set 2 or 3 goals instead of the 1. But do it at your own pace in a space that feels most comfortable to you, because it's your growth and nobody else's. When setting specific goals, so now that you know whether or not you want to set a goal or not, what kind of goals should you be setting? I think goals to different people are specific to those different people. So what I mean is most goals or resolutions made during the new year are something like weight loss, working out, or reading more. These are pretty broad goals, so instead of making broad or slightly vague plans for the future, I'm going to share with you what I do. And if you make those kinds of goals, it's okay. This is more about what I do, and maybe it'll help you in your own journey. Or not, everybody has their own way. But what I try to do is I try to make specific goals that I myself am passionate about. So fun things I look forward to or have always wanted to do in the upcoming year. I try to make goals that I can actually achieve during the year. I do throw in some crazy ones from time to time. Who doesn't? It's just the dreamer in me. So here are some of my goals from 2019. Firstly, I wanted to visit 10 cities, and then I wanted to visit 3 national forests and 5 states. Those were my first 3 goals. I was doing a lot of traveling that year, visiting friends and family, so I thought it would be possible to complete and exceed some of these goals, which I did. Other goals were to go skydiving, create an app, and visit family more often. I did not complete the skydiving one, nor did I create an app. I did visit some family. I also apparently made it a goal to make $1 million that year. Don't know how or why I put that on there, but this was the first year of 100 goals having been set in a year, so it's a little bit disorganized and crazy. In 2020, I made it a goal to visit 20 cities, which is double the amount from the previous year. When I do complete a goal, I double it or I make some sort of variation for the new year to see if I can try to make that. But if you'll notice, I said 20 cities in 2020, which was the year of no travel due to the pandemic. So I wrote down a lot of goals for 2020 and achieved very little. That year was probably the most discouraging year when it came to goal setting for me. It did put a damper on my excitement for goal setting in 2021. Not every goal I make pertains to travel or big gestures. As I make new goals every year, I put more thought into detail about the goal itself, and I understand my limitations from the previous year, so it's a live and learn situation. Detailed oriented goals that would be specific to me and me only, for example, would be, I made it a goal to actually record the first episode of this podcast in 2019, but didn't do so till 2020. This is because the podcast has been an idea of mine since 2018, and was still I was still building the foundation for it and trying to do the research to get something like that started. So that was an incomplete goal for me in 2019. So when this happens, I move the goal that I'm very passionate about to next year's goal list, hoping to achieve it in the next year round, which in this case I did in 2020. Some goals I don't finish, and I either move them over to the next year's list, or I come to the realization that I'm no longer passionate about that particular goal. So instead of moving it over, I let it die in the present year, and I write a new one to replace it altogether. This is what I call rotating goals: out with the old and in with the new. Whatever sticks, sticks, and whatever doesn't. One thing to remember is you don't necessarily have to have all 100 goals written down before the new year. After 2020 happened and the uncertainty of everything, I try not to be too strict about this. So what I'll do now is I write down however many goals I can and continue writing more goals down throughout the year as I think of them. So for 2022, I have 27 goals out of 100 written down. This is because on a weekly or bi-weekly basis, I read over the current goals to see how close I am to completing one or two, to see if there's anything I could do to help move that process along. I give myself a lot of grace, not trying to pressure myself to get a goal done by tomorrow, but rather reminding myself that these are some things that I want to achieve, and I keep that in mind as I go throughout the year. Certain things start to fall into place, but sometimes they fall apart altogether. It's a lot of trial and error. According to Google, you are 42% more likely to achieve goals if you write them down. And I've found that to be quite true, to be honest. I don't know exactly where I got the idea to do 100 specifically. I think it just sounded really good in my head, and then I ended up doing it the first year around, and some years I complete more goals than others, and I get a little bit of a high off of that, being really excited that I'm making progress. But then some years are just complete duds, and it's really disappointing, but you just kind of have to keep going. That's all I have so far. I'm still trying to set goals and figure out what that looks like for me. The way you go about this will probably differ from everybody else, and that's okay. It's your journey. You figure it out as you go. Good luck, and I'm rooting for you. I know this episode was probably a shorter one, but there'll be more to come. I just really I told y'all that I'd have an episode out in January, and your girl is trying. Don't forget to rate this podcast 5 stars, or if you really like it, write a review. It really helps support the show. DM me a screenshot or a photo of you listening to today's episode, and I'll feature it on the official Instagram page at hustlinwithholly. If you didn't know, I've got an Instagram highlight labeled Hustlers, which is what I call you guys, the listeners of the show. That's where I feature everything you guys send me. I love hearing from each and every one of you. If you can't get enough of the show and would like to be involved in other ways, you can always follow the podcast on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram for updates and any feedback you might have. Stay healthy, stay hustling, and let's kick some ass in the new year. All right, bye.